Hi, this is Miss Litton, and this is AP Biology, and this is a Friday morning with my wonderful Period 1 class. Say hi. Hi. And we are continuing on our discussion about membranes. We have already discussed the structure of membranes, and when we look at a membrane, we talked about which of the 4 important organic molecules we could see in a membrane, and what ones can we see up here? Tell me one. Lipids. Okay, so there's a lipid here that's called a phospholipid, right? And it has a hydrophilic portion and a hydrophobic. And a cell membrane is a phospholipid bilayer, so that means it has two layers, right? Okay, and what else do you see in here? Proteins, good. And we're going to talk about it in just a minute, the different functions of proteins and what they can do. But we know a couple of things. We know proteins are made out of amino acids, and we know that amino acids, we know the structure of an amino acid. We've been tested over that. How many different amino acids are there? 20. And what part varies? R groups, and some of those R groups have what on them? Charges on them, okay? So some are hydrophilic and some are hydrophobic. So we know when we look at a protein that the amino acids that are making up this part of the protein must be hydrophobic because they're in the hydrophobic region of the cell membrane. Remember fatty acid chains? These are long hydrocarbons, right? And it's carbons and hydrogens, and carbon tends to share electrons in what fashion? Yeah, evenly. What do we call that? What kind of the bonds are those? Excuse me, what? Non-polar covalent bonds. Good job, okay? And so in that case, water, which is what type of molecule is water? Starts with a P, polar molecule. Water can't arrange either its partially negative oxygen side of it or its partially positive hydrogen side up against those hydrocarbon chains. So as a result, that's why that region is hydrophobic. However, the phosphate group right there is hydrophilic. So these amino acids in this protein, hydrophobic, and on the edges they must be what? Hydrophilic. What else do we see in a protein when we look at the structure, the cell membrane structure? Carbohydrates, good. And that's the carbohydrate side chains. And the ones that are attached to proteins are called glycoprotein, and the one attached to lipids are called glycolipids, and the whole thing is called a glycocalyx. And what's a big thing that plants have that we don't have? Cellulose in their cell walls, right? So if you think of a cell wall, okay, in animal cells we don't have a wall, we have a coat, a cell coat. And that coat is made of the carbohydrate side chains. All right? And then what else? I'm looking for something else in here. So we have proteins, we have phospholipids, we have carbohydrate side chains. What's something right about there? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Thank you, yes. Cholesterol. And cholesterol is underneath the umbrella of what? Lipids. 4 rings of carbon. Yes? Okay, tell your bio buddy, how much of that do you own and do you feel comfortable with? All right, come back to me. Oldest bio buddy, please differentiate between what you would find just to the interior of the cell membrane and then to the exterior of the cell membrane. How are they the same? How are they different? Go ahead, compare and compare. So what do you have to the inside of the cell membrane? The cytoskeleton right here, right? And you don't have that to the exterior. But they're the same, and they're lined with the polar part, right? When we talked about being amphipathic, that there's 2 regions to it, a part that's hydrophilic and a part that's hydrophobic. So the part that's the same are these phosphate heads. The part that's different is you have a cytoskeleton to the interior and a glycocalyx to the exterior. All right, so now we're going to transition into specifically different kinds of protein functions. So on your notes where we're at, now the first type of function is, and look, repeat after me up here, channel. Channel protein, okay? So we're making a channel. Now, what you have to know about all proteins, they are specific, very, very specific. Okay, there is one thing and one thing only that can move through that channel, whatever it is. Maybe it's a chloride ion. That's the only thing that can move through. Not sodium, just that chloride ion. Okay, and in this case, in the channel protein, I'm going to let youngest bio buddy use this slide. Go ahead, talk them through it instead of me. Tell them what a channel protein does. Go ahead.
And then they can cross it whenever they want. Like they can cross straight the membrane into our cell. Cystic fibrosis.
Okay. So on your group shared notes, allows a particular molecule to cross. What do you need to put there? Freely. Okay. An example of this is, if you want to talk about when this does not work, is when a particular molecule, if this was a chloride ion, and if it couldn't cross it, and it wasn't allowed to get through, then you can end up getting cystic fibrosis, which is a recessive inherited disease. It is tremendously difficult to deal with. Oftentimes you see it with people who just have trouble with breathing and their airways having trouble. But somebody who has cystic fibrosis, you can have things besides in their lungs, things building up in their liver, in their pancreas, in their intestines, in their reproductive tract. You see people who have cystic fibrosis having to have the back of their back beat kind of like this regularly to break up that mucus, or they can wear a percussion vest that breaks it up for them. But you can't get it broken up in these other organs like you would in your lungs, and so usually they have a much younger life expectancy. And that's all because one protein channel is not working correctly. That protein channel is built out of what? Amino acids. Who dictates the primary structure of all the amino acids in your proteins? In your DNA. So if your DNA is messed up, what else can be messed up? Your proteins. This is an inherited disease. So that means a parent who has a bad gene is passing it on to their offspring. Okay? So another example here, okay, are carrier proteins. So now carrier. What was our first one? Channel. And we could pass freely. Now this is a carrier. This is specifically helping a molecule get from one side to the other. You're binding to it and you're carrying it across. So for your oldest bio buddy, go ahead, take this one. Okay, so carrier proteins, what do you need to fill in your notes there? Selectively interact with a specific molecule. Now, the most common one that you talk about is the sodium-potassium pump. Now, let me tell you why it's called a pump. It's called a pump because it's a form of active transport. It requires energy. And the sodium-potassium pump, what it does for you is it takes sodium from one side of the membrane, from the interior, and it passes it to the other side. And it concentrates the sodium ions to one side of the membrane. So it keeps going. I want it over here, I want it over here. Diffusion, when molecules go from a higher concentration to a lower concentration, it's kind of just evening out. In this case, you're taking sodium from the interior and putting more out there and more out there and more out there and more out there. So that's going to require energy. And the sodium-potassium pump, it'll take 3 sodiums that you can see right here, and it's binding onto them, and it's going to take these 3 and ship them out. And at the same time, what it's going to do is it's going to take potassium from the outside and bring it in. So it's an exchange process. 3 pluses out, 2 pluses in. We're going to talk about the significance of the sodium-potassium pump when we talk about nerves and when we talk about muscles. And if you think about all the food you ate yesterday. And why did you need to eat that food? For energy, okay? 30% of all of your energy, so 30% of the energy you would get from your food went to your sodium-potassium pumps in your body. So that's significant, right? Okay, we did a chi-square on that one. All right, so on your notes, I think you have, make sure, highlight sodium-potassium pump. And it is possible that some people who are struggling with obesity are having trouble with their sodium-potassium pump in some way. Okay? Whose turn is it, oldest or youngest? Youngest, okay. So now let's talk about the cell recognition. So here, let's learn the things for it. First one we learned about was a what? Channel. Second one is a carrier. Okay, and go back. Show me this one again. Channel, things passed freely, right? And then we had a carrier, so you're interacting to move something across. The next one is cell recognition. Okay, cell recognition. So cells can't see each other, so how they know one cell from another is they make contact with them. All the cells in my body say Winnie Lytton. So if there's any cell in there here who doesn't say Winnie Lytton, and I come across that cell, all of a sudden I'm like, this is not a Winnie Lytton cell. This is some foreign thing. Kill, okay? I can do that. I can destroy it through cell recognition. Or it could be that during development, liver cells are developing, your pancreas is developing. You not only recognize one cell from another that it belongs to your body, but what tissue it belongs to. And during development, from your central nervous system, you have neurons migrating down to target tissues, and they're finding the right tissues to connect to. I mean, you are one amazing thing. And so they can tell one tissue from another tissue as well. Cell recognition can also help to know if there's too much crowding in that. And remember, I think we talked about this already. If cells can't determine, hey, there's another cell standing right next to me, then they'll keep reproducing and reproducing and reproducing. What do we call that? Cancer. So that could be a failure of that as well. Okay, so on your notes for that one, cell recognition protein, glycoproteins are part of the MHC. We're going to spend some time on that when we do the immune system. And it's how a cell recognizes self from non-self. Recognizes self from non-self. Okay, and where you might see problems with that is during organ donation, that you might need a valve, or you might need a piece of a liver, you might need a heart or a lung. And so even though that's for the good of your body to get that organ transplant, your body goes, no, this doesn't belong here. It's not part of the Max Freeman body plan. And so we are going to destroy it, okay? All right? So cell right now, our next one, number 4, whose turn is it? Old? Okay, you're in charge of this one. Go ahead, oldest bio buddy. You got it. Here's your thing for receptor. Go like this. Receptor. Okay, receptor. Okay, so what was our first one? Channel. Okay, and what was our example of a disease where we had trouble with a channel? Cystic fibrosis. Okay, then what was our next one? Carrier. And what was our one for that one? The exchange. What did we exchange? Sodium, potassium, pump. What was our third one? Cell recognition. And we're going to use that in what system? Immune system. Okay, and then here's our fourth one. It's a receptor. Okay, a receptor. Okay, so for your receptor, it's shaped so that a specific molecule, and it could be, for example, like a hormone, okay, can bind to it. So there are various types of dwarfism. various. So you could be in proportion, out of proportion, etc. Maybe you're making, no problem, you're making all the growth hormone that you need, and that would be your anterior pituitary who's making that, and it's releasing that growth hormone. But the problem is your cells, the receptors for those cells, let's say they are shaped in the wrong way. Okay? These receptors are made out of what again? Amino acids. Who dictates the sequence of the amino acids? The DNA. So do you see how you can inherit that? So your DNA is telling you what amino acids to be there. The shape could be wrong because you could have the wrong amino acid there. So when it goes into, remember, primary, secondary, and what? Tertiary structure, it folds incorrectly, right? And if it folds incorrectly, all of a sudden now it can't dock with that receptor. So even though you have plenty of growth hormone, your receptor for that growth hormone to tell the cell what to do, to grow, make more, it doesn't hear it, and so you could end up with different forms of dwarfism. All right, next one. Is it youngest bio buddy? Yeah. Okay, youngest bio buddy, you do enzymatic. Go ahead.
These are just like the speed of reactions.
Okay, so some proteins that are inside the cell, they could have a neighboring protein that's over here, and this does work this way with adenylate cyclase. And so it could be a receptor, which then triggers this enzymatic protein, which then triggers another reaction. And in this case, it could have to do with ATP metabolism. And if you have cholera, and when we look at that, we're like, oh, severe diarrhea, like, okay. But people die from cholera, okay? And this would be the kind of cholera you cannot stop. It would be everything you ate just came out liquid, and you would have to change diapers and everything to contain that. And the problem with cholera is in that matter that's getting released and you're cleaning them up, that's how you could get cholera. So it gets transmitted to the caregivers as well, and to their caregivers and their caregivers, so it can be a huge epidemic. And the problem with diarrhea, when you get diarrhea, the big problem is you become dehydrated. And so even though it sounds counterproductive when you have diarrhea and you're just like, oh my gosh, I barely made it, you need to continue to drink what? Water, because that's when you have the complications and where people have to get hospitalized as a result of that. So if you're throwing up, then it even makes it more difficult, right? Because you can't hold anything down. But if you do have the runs and you're not throwing up, really try to continue to sip and drink water, because probably the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pass out, and then somebody's going to find you in the bathroom with your panties around your ankle, and that's going to be hard. So just make sure you just keep sipping that water, okay, as you go along. Okay, so on our notes, that was really good for recording. Okay, for enzymatic proteins carry out specific metabolic functions, adenylate cyclase, and an enzymatic protein metabolizes ATP. And then cholera is a bacterial disease that releases a toxin that interferes with the process. Okay, and then the next one we want to talk about, and we're going to talk about cell-to-cell junctions later, but this part is pretty cool because what holds plants together is they have cell walls, so they can literally cement their cell walls together. But think about it. Grab your skin right here between your thumb and your pointer finger, right? Are you ripping that skin off? No. Could you if you really wanted to? Yeah, actually you could, but yeah, but none of you would because that'd be super painful, right? But you could. But these cells, there's no cell wall to hold them together, so one cell is connected to another cell. So there are different ways that can happen. Sometimes go like this. Okay? So sometimes it's just protein to protein directly like this, and then sometimes it's channel to channel like this. So one cell can send a message right to another cell by sharing a protein channel like this. And sometimes it's like this, and sometimes their cytoskeleton extends from one cell right through a protein to another cell. And so that can help with cell junctions as well. Yes?
Are there some proteins that are more likely to be peripheral protein than others?
Yes, but that's also, again, dictated right by your DNA and by what function it has. Okay, so let's review all of them. What was the first one we had? Channels, and then we had what? Carriers. Do it with me, okay? Do you not see an essay question right here? Do it again. Channels, and then carriers, and then what? Cell recognition, and then what? Receptors, and then did I give you another one? Yeah, enzymatic, okay, and then junction, okay, and that way you can remember the different cell functions. Junction, what's your function? Okay, do you want me to put, okay, so we hope that's really helpful and you're making good choices, okay.